As tensions between the United States and China continue to escalate, recent developments have underscored the delicate balance that Chinese leadership is attempting to maintain. In the wake of former President Donald Trump's pointed criticisms of China, particularly in relation to trade practices and economic policies, President Xi Jinping has adopted a notably calm and strategic response. This approach reflects Xi's broader economic agenda as he seeks to stabilize the Chinese economy amid internal and external pressures. In a recent editorial published by the People's Daily, Xi's commitment to fostering a robust private sector was highlighted as a crucial component for driving economic growth. The editorial emphasized the importance of creating a favorable business environment, particularly in light of growing challenges. The greater the difficulties and challenges we encounter, the more determined we must be to implement policies and measures that support the development of the private economy, it stated. This statement not only signals a shift in rhetoric but also showcases Xi's recognition of the vital role that private enterprises play in China's economic landscape. The timing of these remarks coincides with the upcoming two sessions, an annual gathering of China's top legislative and advisory bodies. Ahead of this meeting, the Economic Daily, another party-affiliated newspaper, echoed similar sentiments, stressing that a society governed by the rule of law is essential for business success. What private enterprises worry about is never how fierce the competition is, but whether the playing field is fair, it asserted, calling for equal treatment for all businesses. This renewed focus on the private sector comes at a time when China's youth are facing a significant job crisis, exacerbated by economic slowdowns and structural shifts within the economy. Recent reports suggest that unemployment rates among young people are alarmingly high, further complicating the economic outlook. As the government seeks to promote job creation and economic stability, the emphasis on private enterprise as a driver of growth becomes even more critical. Despite Xi's efforts to bolster the private sector and address unemployment, the backdrop of geopolitical tensions, particularly with the United States, looms large. Trump's recent rhetoric has included sharp critiques of China's trade practices, raising concerns about potential retaliatory measures and further economic decoupling. This external pressure may shape the government's policies and its approach to private enterprises as it navigates the complexities of international relations while attempting to maintain domestic growth. As China prepares for these significant political meetings, the interplay between domestic economic policies and international relations will be crucial. The government's ability to foster a thriving private sector while managing external pressures will not only influence China's economic trajectory but also its standing on the global stage. Looking ahead, observers will be keenly watching how Xi's administration balances these competing priorities. The outcomes of the two sessions may provide further clarity on the direction of China's economic policies and its response to international challenges, especially as it seeks to reassure both domestic and foreign investors of its commitment to a stable and equitable business environment. In recent weeks, China's political landscape has been marked by a significant focus on the private sector, highlighted by a series of editorials from state-affiliated media stressing the need for a supportive environment for private enterprises. This shift comes at a crucial time as the country prepares for the annual two sessions where key legislative discussions will take place. The timing of these publications suggests a concerted effort by the Chinese Communist Party to bolster private enterprise amid growing economic challenges and international scrutiny. The People's Daily and the Economic Daily, both prominent party publications, have echoed the sentiments of President Xi Jinping regarding the importance of fostering a thriving private sector. In an editorial, the People's Daily stated, "The greater the difficulties and challenges we encounter, the more determined we must be to implement policies and measures that support the development of the private economy." This reflects a recognition within the party that supporting private enterprises is essential for economic resilience and growth. Moreover, the Economic Daily emphasized the necessity of a fair and just market environment for private firms, noting that what private enterprises worry about is never how fierce the competition is but whether the playing field is fair. By advocating for equal treatment in business practices, the party aims to alleviate concerns that have plagued the private sector, particularly in the face of perceived favoritism towards state-owned enterprises. This renewed focus on the private sector is particularly intriguing given the backdrop of Xi Jinping's ongoing purges within the party, which have raised questions about stability and governance in China. Analysts suggest that the purges, although designed to consolidate power, may inadvertently create an environment of uncertainty that private enterprises find challenging. As she continues to navigate these internal and external pressures, the current messaging appears to be a strategic pivot aimed at reassuring both domestic and international stakeholders of the government's commitment to economic reform. As the two sessions approach, the implications of these editorials will be closely monitored. They may signify a turning point in how the Chinese government interacts with the private sector, especially as foreign relations remain tense. The calls for a supportive environment may also reflect broader global economic trends where the private sector is increasingly seen as vital to innovation and growth. In conclusion, the developments surrounding Xi Jinping's administration and its recent endorsements of private enterprise signal a complex balancing act. While the party seeks to maintain control, it also recognizes the necessity of a robust private sector to drive future economic growth. As the upcoming legislative meetings unfold, the world will be watching to see how these rhetorical shifts translate into concrete policies and whether they can indeed create a more favorable environment for private businesses in China. The path forward remains uncertain, but the emphasis on cooperation and support for the private sector could pave the way for a more dynamic economic landscape in the years to come. In a notable shift in China's economic rhetoric, leading Communist Party-affiliated newspapers have emphasized the importance of the private sector, coinciding with an upcoming critical political event known as the Two Sessions. This change in tone comes as President Xi Jinping engages with prominent entrepreneurs, signaling a potential recalibration of policies aimed at fostering private enterprise growth. On February 27, 2025, both the People's Daily and the Economic Daily published editorials advocating for a more supportive environment for private businesses. This initiative appears to be a response to a series of economic challenges that have put pressure on the country's growth trajectory. The greater the difficulties and challenges we encounter, the more determined we must be to implement policies and measures that support the development of the private economy, stated the People's Daily. The editorial further suggested that a commitment to these policies would yield broader opportunities for the private sector's expansion. The Economic Daily echoed these sentiments, emphasizing the necessity of a fair competitive landscape for private enterprises. What they seek boils down to four words: equal treatment for all. It asserted. This call for equality in the business environment reflects a growing recognition within the government of the vital role that private companies play in economic recovery and innovation. This shift in narrative is particularly significant given the backdrop of Xi's recent high-profile meeting with leading business figures. Analysts interpret this interaction as a strategic move to reassure the private sector of its importance to the Chinese economy, especially as the nation grapples with various internal and external pressures. While the tone of support for private enterprises is a welcome development for many in the business community, it also raises questions about the underlying motivations and future implications. Observers note that the Chinese government has historically maintained a cautious stance towards private enterprise, often favoring state-owned enterprises as the backbone of the economy. However, the ongoing economic pressures and the need for sustained growth may necessitate a more balanced approach. The context of this shift is further complicated by the international landscape, particularly the evolving geopolitical dynamics involving the United States and Russia. As the U.S. seeks to redefine its relationships with global powers, including China, the implications for Chinese businesses, especially those engaged in international trade, could be profound. Analysts suggest that a more favorable environment for private enterprises in China could enhance its competitiveness on the global stage, particularly amid shifting alliances and trade policies. Looking ahead, the emphasis on private sector support may catalyze a series of legislative and policy changes during the two sessions, which could foster a new era of growth and innovation in China. However, the sustainability of this approach remains to be seen. As the government balances its long-standing commitment to state control with the pressing need for economic dynamism. As Xi Jinping navigates this complex landscape, the future of China's private sector will likely remain a critical focal point in both domestic and international discussions. In recent weeks, the geopolitical landscape has shifted dramatically with implications that stretch far beyond the immediate crises. As tensions rise, particularly surrounding Taiwan and the ongoing war in Ukraine, the actions and rhetoric of world leaders are shaping a new era of international relations. Notably, Chinese President Xi Jinping's increasing assertiveness and military posturing has drawn attention, particularly as he navigates the complex dynamics of U.S. foreign policy under President Donald Trump, whose recent decisions are perceived as emboldening adversarial nations. Xi Jinping's government has signaled a tougher stance on Taiwan, recently announcing military drills that underscore Beijing's commitment to projecting power in the region. These maneuvers are seen not only as a show of strength but as a direct response to the perceived weakening of U.S. influence in Asia, a vacuum that experts believe could be filled by China. Michael Green, Chief Executive Officer of the United States Studies Center at the University of Sydney, noted that it is no exaggeration to say that this deeply unnerved even our closest allies in Asia. The apprehension stems from a broader concern that if the U.S. fails to support its allies, particularly in the Asia-Pacific, it might embolden China to take aggressive actions against Taiwan. This strategic recalibration comes in the wake of Trump's controversial approach to foreign policy, which has left many traditional allies questioning America's reliability. Just days ago, the U.S. sided with Russia at the United Nations by voting against a resolution condemning the invasion of Ukraine, a move that has sent shockwaves through European and democratic circles worldwide. As former U.S. diplomat James Bindenagel pointed out, the loss of trust in America creates a vacuum, and that vacuum is likely to be filled by cooperation between Moscow, Beijing, Pyongyang, and Iran. This shift not only threatens the stability of Europe but could also reshape alliances in Asia. The ramifications of Trump's foreign policy decisions extend beyond mere rhetoric. They could have profound consequences for global security. With American reliability in question, countries may turn to China for alternative partnerships. Green emphasized that China is swooping in, offering to replace the United States as the partner of choice, which could result in a significant realignment of geopolitical alliances. This has raised alarms among U.S. allies, particularly in light of the potential for increased Chinese aggression in Taiwan. Compounding these tensions is the ongoing war in Ukraine, where the response from the U.S. has become increasingly ambiguous under Trump's administration. The former president's inclination to negotiate a peace deal without Ukrainian representation raises fears that such an approach could lead to a flawed agreement, emboldening Russia and potentially leading to further incursions into Europe. Timothy Sale, a historian at the University of Toronto, warned that what might feel like peace in the short term could be laying the conditions for a broader war in the future. The response from European leaders has been one of grave concern. French President Emmanuel Macron articulated this sentiment, stating, "How can you then be credible in the face of China if you're weak in the face of Putin?" The anxiety is palpable as European nations re-evaluate their defense strategies and consider increasing military spending in light of U.S. policy shifts. Friedrich Merz, the presumptive next Chancellor of Germany, expressed similar worries, stating, "It is unclear if the NATO alliance will survive." As these geopolitical chess pieces are maneuvered, the question of how this will all play out remains uncertain. With China ramping up its military readiness and the U.S. charting a new unpredictable course under Trump, the international community is left to grapple with the implications of these developments. As nations reassess their alliances and military strategies, the potential for conflict looms large, particularly in regions where U.S. presence has historically provided a stabilizing force. Looking forward, the global landscape is poised for significant changes as the balance of power continues to shift. The outcomes of military drills, diplomatic engagements, and the evolving nature of international alliances will be closely monitored as nations prepare for an era where traditional partnerships may no longer be reliable. The stakes have never been higher, and the choices made in the coming months will likely define the geopolitical contours of the future. In an escalating geopolitical landscape marked by rising tensions and shifting alliances, China's foreign ministry has firmly responded to recent remarks by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, asserting that efforts by the United States to create discord between China and Russia are doomed to fail. This statement underscores the deepening ties between the two nations, which have increasingly positioned themselves against perceived Western hegemony. Rubio's comments, made during an interview with Breitbart News, suggested that a Russia that remains a permanent junior partner to China poses a significant threat to U.S. interests. He characterized the growing dependency of Russia on China as a troubling development, especially given that both countries are nuclear powers. "I don't know if we'll ever be successful completely at peeling them off," Rubio admitted, acknowledging the complexities surrounding U.S. diplomatic efforts to create distance between Moscow and Beijing. This exchange comes against the backdrop of a broader narrative in which the U.S. seeks to counter the strategic alignment of revisionist powers like China and Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Analysts suggest that the U.S. administration under President Donald Trump is attempting to draw parallels between its current diplomatic strategies and historical precedents, such as President Nixon's groundbreaking visit to China in 1972, which aimed to exploit divisions within the Soviet Union. However, this approach may not yield the intended results, as both China and Russia have demonstrated a commitment to mutual support and cooperation in the face of external pressures. Risk sleepwalking into a Cold War with China. In a speech at the Center on Contemporary China and the World at the University of Hong Kong, he stressed that diplomacy is essential in bridging differences and called for Canada to engage more actively with China instead of taking a confrontational stance. Baird's comments reflect a growing concern among Western nations about the implications of deteriorating relations with China. He urged for a more nuanced approach to diplomacy, emphasizing the importance of maintaining communication channels to address mutual challenges such as climate change and economic stability. In parallel, reports have surfaced regarding the imminent deportation of Uyghur asylum seekers from Thailand to China, drawing condemnation from human rights organizations and international observers. The Campaign for Uyghurs has called for urgent action to prevent the deportation of individuals who face severe risks of persecution upon their return to China. This situation underscores the ongoing humanitarian crises linked to China's policies in Xinjiang, drawing international scrutiny and complicating diplomatic relations further. As the U.S. administration navigates these complex geopolitical waters, it faces a multifaceted challenge, balancing its strategic objectives in countering authoritarian influences while managing relationships with allies that may not share its confrontational posture toward China and Russia. The evolving dynamics suggest that future developments will hinge on the ability of nations to engage constructively, balancing national interests with global stability. In conclusion, as the geopolitical landscape continues to evolve, the interplay between China, Russia, and the West will likely shape international relations in profound ways. Effective diplomacy and engagement will be crucial as nations seek to navigate the complexities of an increasingly multipolar world where alliances are tested and the stakes are higher than ever.